Hello, welcome everyone to this presentation that's hosted by my office, the Office of International Student Affairs, as well as the Office of Career Development and the Office of Alumni Relations. I'm Andrea Pope. I'm the Director of International Student Affairs at Emerson, and I'm just looking in the room to see if there's folks. There's a couple of staff persons that will be introducing themselves along the way. And there might be some other folks that are hopping in and out here. But so many of you have attended some of the other events that we've done during our International Education Week this past week. This event is the third annual, is a highlight of IEW because it represents Emerson's global outreach. Emerson students come from around the world to study in Boston, LA, the Netherlands, and Paris. And the education that they receive at Emerson really prepares them for success in the arts, entertainment, and communication careers around the globe. So before we get started, we wanted to just have some housekeeping notes. So to minimize background noise, we're going to ask participants to be in listen-only mode. And so we would encourage you to submit your questions during the presentation using the chat function in the Zoom window. And then following the presentation, our panelists will answer a few questions as long as time permits. So it's my pleasure to introduce the moderator for this event, Emmy Bagay. She's the Associate Director of International Student Career Services here at Emerson. We are so fortunate at Emerson to have such important partners at offices like the Career Development Center, and Emmy is one of those. She's a first-generation Filipino American. She was born and raised in the Boston area, studied at Boston University, and is now a graduate student herself in Emerson's publishing and writing program. She was involved in campus ministries in Poland for 6 years and has 2 big kids, grown-up kids in their 3rd years of high school and college. And in the US, Emmy has had roles in college admission and student affairs and loves to support international students and those considering international opportunities. So without further ado, Emmy, I'll pass it on to you.
Thank you, Andrea, and hello and welcome to everybody. I'd like to take this moment now to introduce our panelists, if they can turn their cameras on as well. John Deppa, known by many as Deppa, is Emerson class of 2017. He is a live broadcast producer for Riot Games and is based in Berlin, Germany. At Riot, he works on a team of producers who oversee the creative execution of their esports broadcast products. He has worked on the League of Legends European Championship, European Masters, and on Riot's international tournaments. Alongside his colleagues, John is a recipient of the inaugural Sports Emmy for outstanding esports coverage for the 2019 League of Legends World Championship. That's awesome. Melanie Han, known by many as Mel, was born in Korea and raised in East Africa, and currently lives in the UK, where she's pursuing her PhD in creative writing at the University of Surrey. She's a poet, teacher, and author of Sandpaper Tongue, Parchment Lips, which is right here, and has received awards from Boston in 100 Words, Valiant Scribe, The Lyric Magazine, and elsewhere. Melanie finished her MFA in poetry at Emerson and translation at Emerson in 2021 after completing her Master of Education and Bachelor of Arts at Gordon College. Chris Williams, known by mom and grandma as Christopher, class of 2022, is a social media specialist at ESPN, where he creates content about soccer for all of ESPN's FC's social media accounts. Prior to ESPN, he lived in Barcelona for 10 months, studying at Blanquerna during his final semester at Emerson, and working as a social media intern at FC Barcelona. Previously, Chris interned at the Boston Globe during his junior year, was sports editor of the Berkeley Beacon, and played on the soccer team. Welcome to all of you, and thank you for being here. Let's get started. And also, I want to welcome anyone to turn on their cameras so that we can see you, and no pressure or anything, but it's really great when we can do that. So yes, welcome all. And we'll just jump into our questions. You know, a lot of our folks in the audience may be considering international experiences, and I want to take you back to the moments that you decided to, I'm thinking about Melanie coming to the US for your studies as an international student, and then on to your other hops along the way to the other places that you went internationally. And really to all of you, what can you share some moments on your path where you made the decision to go from one country to the next in your story? And anyone can start.
I'll go ahead and start us off. As Emmy mentioned, I'm Korean by birth, but I grew up in East Africa. And when I was growing up in Kenya and Tanzania, I went to an American international boarding school. And so when it was time for us to graduate from high school, it made sense for me to move to the US, even though I'd never been there before, because the other options were either going to Korea or staying in East Africa. But I kind of wanted a new adventure, which is why I decided to move to the US. And after I finished my undergrad and graduate degrees and worked for a bit, I decided that it was time for another new adventure. I feel like there is this great excitement in being able to move to new places and adjust to new environments, which is why I decided to up and move. And here I am now in London.
Thank you, Melanie.
I can hop in next. For me, I actually moved to Berlin from the United States professionally. I think, like most students, as they near graduation and graduate, the anxiety around getting a job is something that becomes very present and very real very quickly. And so when it came to my job search, I was really passionate about esports, and luckily, esports is a really international industry. And there is the North American LCS for Riot Games in North America, as well as a lot of North American esports leagues. But, in my anxiety to just find jobs, I actually ended up applying globally to esports production companies around the world. I wasn't super deterred or intimidated by the international applications because I actually ended up going to Castile Well when I was a student at Emerson. I got the initial shock of the world perspective changing and understanding a little bit more about what it's like to live in Europe and to experience moving to a place where you don't necessarily speak the language. You have to pick everything up as you go. That experience at Emerson made it really easy for me to apply globally, and it made it even easier when Riot reached out from their Berlin offices with a prospective job for me to accept. So I've been here in Berlin now for just about 5 years, so it's been quite a long time.
Awesome. Thanks, John.
Yeah, so my move to Spain was pretty straightforward for me. My dad is from England, so I grew up my whole life wanting to move to Europe eventually after college. I had studied abroad at the Castile Well program. I'd been to Europe many times before that throughout my teenage years. And my favorite thing in the world is soccer, and I wanted to work in soccer. So it was kind of a no-brainer for me to want to move to Europe. So my choice to study at Blanquerna for my last semester at Emerson was pretty straightforward. I always knew I was going to do it. And yeah, I was very intentional with my plans. I wanted to try to stay in Spain and stay in Europe for as long as I could. So I made the right connections that I needed to at Blanquerna. All the professors there are fantastic. Ended up meeting some people from FC Barcelona, and I got an internship for the summer. Ended up staying there for 10 months. Really wanted to practice and perfect my Spanish, which I've been speaking for just over 8 years. I wanted to learn Catalan, wanted to travel and, just get right into the thick of it in soccer in Europe. And yeah, now I'm back in New York City working for ESPN right now. But my goal is to get back to Spain sometime in the near future.
Quick question. When you got accepted to Emerson, you decided to come to Emerson. Did you already know about the Blanquerna partnership?
Yeah, I knew about the Castile Well partnership and the Blanquerna partnership. And that was honestly what really made me want to come to Emerson was the opportunities that it gave me to travel to these other countries and experience new cultures and live abroad, because I knew since I was little that, I wanted to move to Europe.
Okay. So now that you're back in the US, just a question, an additional question for you, Chris, is how do you prepare for going back? You've expressed that you want to go back. How do you do that from coming back here and living and working here?
Yeah, I mean, I'm only 1 month in to my career at ESPN. So, I won't be moving back anytime soon. But yeah, right now, it's an entry-level job. Want to gain as much experience as I can. Still speaking Spanish every day. It's kind of part of my job, translating and everything. And I know the steps that I need to take to go back to Spain. When I was there, I had to meet with a lot of immigration lawyers to discuss visas and work permits and residency permits and all of that. And, just keeping in touch with people at FC Barcelona and all the other connections I have at soccer teams in Europe. So yeah, just kind of taking my time here, enjoying this experience while having an eye on the future as well.
Yeah, it sounds like you're kind of intentionally laying the foundation for returning, right? So that's really great. I'm thinking about now, like the whole cultural shift between going from country to country and what that's like. Can you each share a story, maybe of personal transformation from like sort of international or intercultural experiences that you've had that keeps you wanting to keep going and being a global person? Does that make sense?
Yeah, I can pick that up.
Okay.
So at Blanquerna, it's really unique, that experience, because they bring in Erasmus students, which is Europe's version of study abroad. So all of my friends were Erasmus students for the most part. So for example, my two best friends were from the Netherlands, and we ended up hanging out. I ended up visiting them in the Netherlands. We visited Amsterdam and Groningen, where they're from. So I got to see their hometown, got to hang out with them. And it was just really cool because you're studying abroad. You're going with people that you know from Boston, from Emerson, but you're meeting people from all over the place. Like our friend group was made up of people from Italy, Uruguay, Spain, obviously, Catalonia, the Netherlands, Germany, all these different people. And it's just so cool that you can live in a place and have a shared experience like that and make lifelong friends. I keep in touch with all of them. I'm in group chats with all of them, and we're talking every day. So yeah, it's just really cool that, an international experience like that can give you the opportunity to build these lifelong friendships.
That's awesome. Thank you. I saw you laughing, John. I need to know why.
I think that my gut reaction when I heard the question, I was like, I forget how exactly you worded the question around wanting to plan to maybe stay international for a while. I think the working culture is a lot different. And that was like my initial gut reaction, which was just the pacing of work and what's prioritized was dramatically different than what I was used to in the United States in terms of, the ability to not always be connected necessarily. I think overall, though, in reflecting more on the question, which is not why I was laughing, I was trying to also think of a uh, non-gut answer to the question there. It was I think what's really cool about working in the industry that I am in Berlin specifically is that my office, and as I said earlier, the industry in general is exceptionally international. And so every week there's like a new kind of perspective that's brought in globally from how we approach our work, how we prioritize our broadcasts, what we even want the show to look like. My boss is German, but my immediate colleague is Norwegian, and then I have an associate producer, and he's from Spain, and we work with a graphics developer who moved from Korea, and there's so many different perspectives, and there's so much that you can get out of working with people from all over the globe. And sometimes I think with where the United States is based, it's hard to collaborate internationally a lot of times with time zones or just with the barrier of how far travel is. And so that's something that I find particularly valuable about my time here in Europe.
Awesome. Melanie, I'm thinking about how you've really continent hopped and made those decisions to go from East Africa to the US, back to Korea, and now in London. Surely there are some moments where you're like, where am I? So how did you sort of navigate that space of adjustment and deciding that you'll just continue this way and be like a global person? That's the way I think of you. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think because I grew up traveling and because there was never really a home base, it's just all I've ever known. And I think with each country and place that I've moved to, there have been numerous different types of culture shock. For example, back in Boston, I used to be a teacher. And, in the US, I feel like it's a pretty low power dynamic where colleagues are colleagues. You can laugh and joke and talk as coworkers to the principal, to the superintendent, and other co-teachers.
Mhm.
But when I moved to Korea last year for a short amount of time, one of the higher ups, I think it was our principal, basically said, "Hey, this is what we're going to do now with the school curriculum. Does anyone have any questions?" And so I raised my hand and I said, "Yeah, I have a question. Also, I have a suggestion." But what I didn't realize was that "does anyone have a question" was a rhetorical question of no one should have a question. This is what we're doing.
Mhm.
And just these types of cultural things that I wasn't aware of before, in terms of not speaking out of turn and, well, not speaking out of turn, not speaking so directly to someone who was a superior, not speaking so directly to someone that was older, male, in a position of power and authority, and things like that. But I feel like even with experiences like that, that kind of catch me off guard. Each time that happens, it teaches me something new. It teaches me a new perspective. It teaches me to reflect on my identity, the way that I view the world, and kind of expand upon that worldview and try to take what I like from each culture and kind of shape that into my world.
Ari, Tristan just got off at Central.
I wonder if we can adjust that setting. Sorry about that interruption.
No, but yeah.
Okay, there we go.
Learning and expanding my worldview, I guess.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, I'm actually just absorbing what you just said. It's like I'm like, moderating the conversation, but learning so much. So I really appreciate all of that. And I was going to direct a question to John specifically, but you kind of answered it in what you shared. What made, like, how, deciding to stay. But I wanted to ask you, because I didn't say this earlier, but this is John's second time on this panel, and your career has actually developed from our first conversation in 2020 to now. And that, you addressed a little bit about staying, like, why did you decide to stay, or this sort of like the draw to keep you in Germany. But can you tell us just a little bit about your sort of career arc while in Germany at Riot?
Yeah, so since we last spoke, an entire pandemic has happened and passed, or is still happening. We're kind of still waiting to see, I guess. And in that time, the approach to work and kind of the digitalization of work was really interesting to kind of watch while here in Berlin, because the level of reliance on digital technologies in different countries for work is also very different. For example, here in Germany, it's still a very like cash-based, or at the time that we last spoke, it was very cash-based, very like paper-based. Still have to fax documents to people, like don't email the PDF because that's insecure, like levels of work. And so simultaneously to like my career developing, there's also been just a lot of change professionally in Germany over adopting digital technologies from the pandemic. So what I think has been cool about the most cool since we last spoke is witnessing and being a part of like watching a culture that feels foreign to you also shift, because you can kind of watch it shift as an external observer a little bit, and being less in the moment and noticing like where things are changing. Professionally, I'm taking more of a lead role now in our productions. So I used to be a contributing producer to Riot Games when we spoke in 2020. Now I'm the lead producer of the League of Legends EMEA Championship. So I oversee and am responsible for the Tier 1 competitive league that oversees all of the European markets, like top competition. And now we just actually announced today our expansion of the tournament into the Middle East and Northern Africa. And so in that time, it's taken me to operations in other countries that I previously was kind of a visitor in. Before, I would show up and maybe make a show on site, travel to Vietnam or travel to Korea and be participating in someone else's plan and helping them execute it. And most recently, we just finished a show in Malmö, Sweden, which was our first show back on the road in another country since the pandemic started. And I was leading the team for that show for a broadcast. So no longer was I following someone's plan on how we approach a broadcast in another country. I was the person making the plan. And with that came the navigation of trying to understand professionally how the industry is supposed to operate in Sweden, and also how we work with freelancers in Sweden, the local laws, like becoming a quick expert, pivoting on the fly, while still working with all of the colleagues and trying to keep the same quality of show that I've had. So the level at which I kind of, I guess, interact now internationally with different cultures as I travel has increased in importance and scope, and there's a lot more touch points, which was very intimidating this past summer. But I'm really looking forward to refining those skills and improving upon them in the next year.
Yeah, I was thinking about that skill building. It's like you're as ready as you can be for your next opportunity, but while you're there, you grow, and then you become ready for the next opportunity, and then
Yeah.
you grow. I'm seeing that even when I'm thinking about Mel, going from program to program and how you develop in that program, and then you move on to the next, you grow. Speaking of programs, I'm thinking about Emerson. The thing that we all have in common in this room is Emerson. So considering your education, Emerson culture that you've brought with you, the community of faculty, staff, alumni, any students you might have contact with still, how can you connect your whole Emerson identity to your success or your outlook or your perspectives? Where do you bring Emerson with you, and what does that look like? I don't know, in your hearts. Go, John.
Yeah, I can start with that. I think that, and I'll lean a little bit less, I guess, on the professional development, but I still maintain that between the classes and also all of the student organizations and activities, the amount that you can define your Emerson experience and really be able to launch projects that you're passionate about, lead them, have the support of school, student activity, see what have you. That's something that I still find very unique to Emerson, and just in terms of developing professional skills of top quality. But in terms of the international move more specifically, um, I think that if you're planning on working internationally, attending an international program is super critical and super key. At Emerson, it is very easy as a student to fall into the listen, I'm going to work this part-time job for 25 hours. I'm going to do all my classes, and then I have the Evie Awards, and I have Emerson Channel, and then I'm doing student government, and then I have 12 other projects, and I'm shooting my movie on Tuesday. The Kickstarter campaign is launching. I have, acrobatics training for this student film that I'm doing stunts in. Like, it's so easy to pick up so many things that you want to do. And that pacing, that approach to work, where sometimes it kind of also feels like a competition at Emerson and like who is doing the most, that is not a perspective that is held in a lot of countries, and is not a working ethic that carries over. I remember coming to kind of Germany when everyone was talking about taking paid time off, and you need to take time off and relax a little bit more, John. I almost kind of remember internalizing that as, it has to be a trap, right? Like I got to show up, I got to be there, I got to take on every project. And it truly isn't how pacing works. In some countries, you still can encounter that mentality, or the mentality is even more hardcore, or hardcore in a different way, or, totally indexes differently. But the experience of trying to identify the context that you're working in is kind of really what I want to hone in on. Being
Yeah.
familiar with that experience of realizing that your approach to a situation doesn't necessarily fit the current context, that your perspective might not fit the context, or your approach might not fit the customs, or even what is considered normal or standard or typical in that environment, and being able to identify that, start to think about how you pivot, or try to find out how you can identify what is appropriate or how you want to approach work. That skill set is really important, I think, to feel once or twice before launching into a global context and really practicing. And you get that, I think, with the international programs at Emerson. Thinking back to the Castile Well experience, it was like the honeymoon period for the first week. It was like the oh cool for the second week, and it was like cool great for the third week. And then as we realized like what was happening for midterms and all the other things that we had to do while we were there, then it hits you like a truck, and you're like, oh, I don't know what's going on. And the next few weeks is kind of spent, localizing yourself once kind of the honeymoon period wears off of it. And I think that experience of being in a different context, of realizing that like you're the guest or you're the visitor or you're the outsider, and you need to figure out what you're operating in now is something to really take advantage of while you're at Emerson with these international programs.
Yeah. I'm thinking, Chris, about your Castile. Your Castile, right? And I'm thinking about what John was mentioning about involvement. And so how did you do that? I was remembering your bio with the Beacon and soccer and the Globe. How did you balance things out? Or were there moments where you didn't balance them out and you could have? And how did that whole experience prepare you for what your international experience and then making those decisions now with the different choices that you have in front of you?
Yeah, so freshman year was definitely a bit rough, because I was, full-time on the soccer team, and it was my first semester at Emerson. And I wanted to join all of these orgs. I wanted to join WBN, wanted to join the Beacon, wanted to join Emerson Channel Sports. I wanted to join everything, right? I wanted to get my career going, just as an 18-year-old who wants to be in the journalism industry. But, with soccer, I couldn't find a way to balance it as well as I did throughout the rest of my life, because I've been playing soccer since I was 5 years old. So I was always balancing that with school. And then I was a Boy Scout, and I was also in band and all of these different activities. So it's easy in high school to balance all of it out. You have your parents to help you. But at Emerson, I was a full-time, college soccer player, and then I was a student as well. So it was actually pretty hard the first semester to do that. So after my freshman year, I quit the soccer team, actually. And that's when I really got into, the Beacon and WBN. I ended up being like a beat reporter for them, going to all these BU and Harvard sports events, and, being able to cover that. And then, just joining different orgs and being able to find a better balance in my life while still hoping to work in soccer somehow, just, not as an athlete. So yeah, the professional skills and the balance that Emerson taught me when it comes to that was incredible, and something I still carry with me every day. But yeah, in terms of the international experience, as John was mentioning before, it's like integral, I think, to study in a international program while at Emerson. That we have so many different opportunities, whether you just want to do a couple weeks in the summer. I think it's like the Global Pathways programs, or if you want to do the Castle, which I think is the perfect option because you're still in an Emerson community, but on the weekends you can go out and do your own thing with your friends from Emerson anywhere in Europe that you want to. And you really get to see all these different cultures, get to be immersed in all these different foreign countries where they're speaking foreign languages, and see places that you didn't think that you'd be able to, which is really cool. And that really expanded my worldview. And another great thing about Emerson is I'm sure a lot of you have shared this experience. A lot of my friends at Emerson were international to begin with. My freshman year, I had 2 or 3 international suite mates, and all of my friends at Emerson spoke at least 2 languages, which I think is pretty cool. So my roommate all 4 years is fluent in English and Spanish. A couple of my best friends are, bilingual in English and Spanish, which really encouraged me to improve my Spanish and, want to go to Barcelona and you really improve that fluency and get as good as that as I can get. And so, yeah, that's a big reason why I chose to go to Blanquerna, and also just because of the professionals that they have there. Their professors are just as great as they are here at Emerson. It's a very similar institution in that way. Classes are the same, but you get more integrated with all these international students with different backgrounds, and you're living in a different country, and you can choose to take classes in 3 different languages if you want to, which I did, which is pretty cool. So yeah, Emerson really set me up to achieve my dreams internationally. I always knew I wanted to do it, but Emerson actually gave me the tools and the programs to be able to really chase those dreams and to achieve it.
That's awesome. Thanks, Chris. Shifting gears a little bit, I'm thinking about Mel, who's gone from, from program to program, undergrad, grad, PhD. I'm thinking about your grad program at Emerson, one that I'm, closely connected to as a grad student currently. Can you tell us a little bit about how you decided to pursue a PhD from that foundation you laid at Emerson, and what was the faculty support like, or any Emerson support like, that helped you make that decision and go for it?
Yeah, oh my goodness, I could honestly gush about Emerson faculty for days. But before I started my MFA at Emerson, I was a high school Spanish and English teacher at just like the local public school systems in Gloucester. And my time at Emerson was the first time that I actually was serious about my writing, my poetry, with amazing faculty like Rajiv Mohabir and Dan Tobin, and just amazing people that really encouraged me to keep writing, and kind of think about poetry in a more critical and more creative sense. I think that kind of got me thinking about PhD programs. And then also during my MFA, I got to teach in the writing studies program, teaching, writing 101 and 121 and all those fun freshman year courses. But while I taught those classes, I actually really enjoyed that age level. It felt like it was a lot more content-based than the high school classes that I used to teach. I loved just Emerson freshman engagement with writing and research writing and things like that. And so that kind of got me wanting to continue on teaching at the college level. And so I figured, hey, I should just continue on with my studies and do my PhD and hopefully stay in academia and teach and write, and kind of merge all of those things that I'm interested in doing a PhD.
Mm-hmm. So where you are now, did you plan to go to London, or was there like other options? How did you land in London?
Yeah, so I applied to a couple of different programs, a couple in the US and Canada, which is where my partner's from, and then a handful in the UK. And then out of all of those, amongst the acceptances, the place that I'm at right now offered to give me full funding, and how can I turn that down?
Awesome.
Here we are.
That's amazing. I didn't even know that. So congratulations.
Oh, thank you.
Where do you already kind of see yourself staying there, or have you thought about those things where you want to be after this? Is it another continent?
Probably. So perhaps I'll stay in the UK. I think it kind of depends on job opportunities. I'm not sure at this moment whether I'll ever move back to the US on a more permanent basis. But my partner and I could move to Canada. Maybe we'll consider Korea. My parents still live in East Africa, so that's always an option. Or maybe we'll go somewhere in Europe, or I don't know, maybe Australia. Haven't lived there yet, so.
Nice. So I'm just thinking of all three of you, and developing over time your careers, just personally, going from one opportunity to the next. And sometimes we can plan, and sometimes there are unexpected things that happen, whether good or bad. And I'm thinking about the room, and if there's anyone here who is like, I am facing the unknown, I don't know if I can do this. Of course, we're here because, your stories are so inspiring. It gives us sort of that motivation to try, right? But there's always the hesitance. So can you share a little bit about any challenges or even serendipitous moments that sort of helped you, just sort of guide you, sort of those signposts that helped you make the decisions to move forward in your path?
I'll go. I can definitely say that the process of like, am I making the right decision? The kind of self-doubt or fear of the unknown in the jump is something that comes up a lot, professionally speaking, even when you're not considering, moving halfway around the globe. Doubly so if you are. For me personally, that's come up a lot of times in deciding if I want to stay. When I moved out to Berlin, for the first time, it was actually just for a 9-month contract. So the decision was, do I want to relocate my life for that period of time, things like that. And then, eventually I was like, well, it's a great adventure. I can probably make it happen, thinking about means and things like that. And the unknown, I eventually started thinking as an opportunity to challenge myself again, a bit of an adventure, right? And that slowly, that 9-month contract turned into a, hey, do you want to stay for longer? And I've been in a pretty long-term relationship with my partner, who's still in Boston to this day. And the decision always comes with, is it is it time to stay? Is it time to go? What does that look like? The pandemic came and went, and that brought a lot of uncertainty as well with, how long is this going to last? Do I want to go back home, be closer to family? And so I think overall my advice when kind of facing decisions that feel impossible is sometimes the best decision is just to make one and figure it out as you go rather than being paralyzed by the opportunity, or not even considering the options on the table and kind of sticking with where you're at because it's comfortable. Sometimes that uncertainty is an adventure, and it's what you end up growing from. At Emerson, sometimes it feels like, if something goes wrong, there's a grade attached to it, right? If it's a class, or something goes wrong with a student project, maybe there's a little bit of a reputation thing because you're, working with the same individuals. But kind of once you leave the collegiate bubble, the only person that's really holding you accountable for your mistakes or your learnings long term is going to be yourself. You can make mistakes and you can grow from them, and it's okay to fail and learn from failings, or it's okay to make a decision and have it be the wrong decision and realize that it's the wrong decision, and then step that back, or change or relocate again or go to another job. It's completely in your freedom and your right to do it, and that's often where the most personal development and professional development comes from.
Awesome.
I think that's actually a really good point. And in terms of, kind of making that choice, I don't think there is ever a right choice or a wrong choice, right? There are choices that you learn from, you grow from. And if it's a positive experience, that's great. If it's a negative experience, that also happens. So for example, when my parents chose to relocate from Korea to East Africa 30 years ago to do humanitarian work, that is a choice that they made, and a decision that impacted like me as a literal infant. And those decisions have, after effects that kind of shape people into who they are. And so every decision that you make, whether it is a long-term decision, a short-term decision, kind of continues to form who you are as a person. And so, yeah, just try things out. There isn't a right or wrong thing.
Thanks, Melanie.
Mel basically touched on what I was going to say as well. I was going to say, yeah, there's not a right or wrong answer, and every decision that you make just helps you gain experience for whatever your next path is in life. So like my decision to go to Barcelona, I just wanted to do it. I'd never lived in another country that I like kind of knew the language to. So I think it was a really cool challenge for me, and I always like to be challenged. So that's why I took that opportunity, fully immersed myself in it. And even though I'm not in Barcelona anymore, I took this job here in New York City because it'll help me get back to where I want to be when I'm in the future. So there wasn't really a right or wrong answer if this was the right choice for me. It's just going to help me gain experience needed to get back to wherever I want to be going forward. So yeah, just it's kind of cliche, but honestly, just follow your dreams and like make it happen. That's kind of what I've been doing, and yeah, there's no right or wrong answer. Just kind of make it happen and learn along the way.
I remember, Chris, when we talked a couple of weeks back, you had mentioned something about, when you were at the castle, it was spring 2020. So you couldn't stay because of the pandemic. That was totally unexpected, obviously. But then that impacted your decision to go to Spain, that because you wanted to go back, right?
Yeah.
And then you told me a story about a person that you connected with in a class that was another person that connected you to ESPN, if I'm correct. Does that sound right? Like one thing led to the other, so that the one opportunity was connected to the next opportunity.
That's how I ended up getting the job at Barcelona, not at ESPN.
Right. Can you share that story? Like the unexpected? Sure. Yeah.
Sure. So I actually saw a question in the chat that said, "Did the Emerson Mafia help you get international jobs?" Well, an extension of the Emerson Mafia, I guess you can call it the Blanquerna Mafia, because Emerson's connected with Blanquerna. And so yeah, my digital content management professor at Blanquerna was the head of communications for FC Barcelona, which obviously, if you guys don't follow soccer, is probably the biggest soccer team in the world. And so I knew I wanted to work in in soccer for a soccer team, probably in social media or some form of digital media for them. So I purposely took her class. I knew that she taught there. Through the year-long process it took to decide whether I was going to do the program, I had to talk to a lot of people from Blanquerna and from Emerson, and I knew that she was one of the professors, and that's kind of what helped me decide, okay, yeah, I'm definitely going to go to Barcelona, and I'm definitely going to take her class, no matter what class it is, and try to make the best of it. And I did really well in the class, and she ended up bringing in FC Barcelona's social media manager, who is a Blanquerna graduate. So she came into class, she spoke, she talked about her job, how Blanquerna helped her get the job. So after class, I ended up speaking to her, the social media manager, and she told me there's an internship opening and to send her my CV, which I did the next day on LinkedIn. And then she immediately responded, invited me for an interview at FC Barcelona's offices. And yeah, the rest is basically history. So yeah, it's kind of like an extension of the Emerson Mafia, but it's the Blanquerna Mafia.
Nice.
That makes sense.
Networking.
Yeah,
I see. Thank you, Chris. And thank you, everybody. I'm going to jump to Andrea, who will field some questions in the chat, and then we'll wrap up in a little, maybe 15 minutes or so.
Yeah, thank you. So we have some questions that are coming in the public chat. We also have a few that have come in through private. So I'm going to start with some of the ones that came in over the course of the discussion. One question was language a big issue in choosing to work abroad? I know, Christopher, you've talked a little bit about languages being a draw and being able to use those, but for either you or for others, what part did language play in your decision?
Yeah, I can pick that up there. So yeah, I've been, like most people, you take a language in high school, and I took Spanish in high school. It was my favorite subject. I took 6 Spanish classes in high school, and I was actually kind of influenced by my brother. My brother's fluent in 4 languages. He's a Russian interpreter. That's his job right now. And my mom grew up in a largely Spanish-speaking neighborhood in New Jersey, and speaks Spanish as well. And I knew I always wanted to live abroad. And I said, okay, I'm going to learn a language. And learning languages is actually now like one of my favorite things, speaking a new language, being able to understand that. And, even if I don't understand it, I love the challenge of learning it and asking questions and, improving, even if you make a mistake. So that's what really drew me to the Barcelona program. I've been speaking Spanish for 8 years, and I was really good in high school. And then at Emerson, I stopped speaking it unless I was with my friends. And so I really wanted to improve it. And while in Barcelona, you're encouraged to learn Catalan, obviously, because of the region of Catalonia that Barcelona is in. So I liked that challenge as well. I could take classes in English and Spanish, which I've been doing for 8 years in my life, but I could also take classes in Catalan and go outside and speak in Catalan. And when I got the job at FC Barcelona, the language they speak there, the primary language, is Catalan. So every single meeting that we had, every email that we received, all of the texts in our WhatsApp groups were all in Catalan. So I had to learn on the fly, which was a challenge that I really enjoyed. Obviously, there's some overwhelming days where I was like, what's happening here? Because it's not the same as Spanish, it's pretty different, but I really enjoyed the challenge, and I'm actually taking Catalan classes right now. So yeah, learning different languages has always been something that has fascinated me, largely because of my family and just my dream to live abroad. And yeah, a lot of more languages that I want to learn as well, because one day I hope to live in the Netherlands as well. Largely inspired by my trip to Castile. I would love to live in Amsterdam and work there. So Dutch is also on the list. So yeah, I know that's a lot, but yeah, love
Yeah,
language.
and just on the same line, I wonder if either Christopher or others, if you might want to jump into like what are some tips that you have for navigating the job market in countries where you're not fluent? So tips about making it work in a language that's not your first.
Yeah, I guess I can pick that up as well. So yeah, for me in Spain, yeah, I'm not fully fluent in Spanish, but I'd call myself like an advanced speaker probably. So I can obviously communicate with people, but one thing I've learned is that um, companies, large companies in particular, always need people who can speak English because it's a huge market and it's probably the biggest market in the world. So they need people who are fluent in English. So for me, I was really shocked when I got the job at Barca because, it's the biggest soccer team in the world, and they're just taking this random kid from rural Pennsylvania to come work on their English social media. But it's because I loved soccer. So I was passionate about the industry that I was going into. I had the professional skills already because of Emerson and just other like internships that I did on my own. So I had the professional skills, and I'm fluent, obviously, in English and can also communicate in Spanish. Um, a lot of companies look for people who can speak English. Like I know a lot of my friends who stayed in Barcelona. I know, for example, one of my best friends, she's from Germany. She's living in Barcelona right now, working for an American company because she can speak English. She can't speak Spanish, but she can speak English. So yeah, there are a lot of job opportunities out there. As long as you can speak English and you're open to learning a new language, you don't have to become fluent in it overnight. But as long as you're open to that, a lot of companies will look into you.
Thank you, Christopher. John, would you have anything else to say as somebody who's
Yeah.
working in Germany?
So this is not to say that you can get away with not learning the language while you're living in the country because, legal personal documents, they're all going to be in the language that of the country that you operate in. Like my job contracts are in German. I need to get them translated to English, but like legally the German version prevails. But as Chris was saying, the there are a lot of American companies that operate with global footprints, and the primary language for these international companies end up being English, just for the sake of coordination, for the sake of working across borders. It just ends up being a very common business language in what I've encountered in my work in the television market and also in navigating. Where at Riot we work with vendors that exist in other spaces, whether that's sales operations, marketing campaigns, business development. It is a lot of English language speaking. In terms of navigating the application process, because I was poking also around the question, it really depends on the country that you're going for. I know a lot of these international companies will still use like LinkedIn and Indeed to advertise their jobs. But for some companies, a lot of the process still may be in local channels, or even the search terms may still be in the local words for the job that you're listing, despite needing the English speech for the job listing. So when it comes to navigating this, having a sense of where you want to potentially work and either looking into what websites are used in that country, or finding a quick translation for like job search in that language could probably help out. The other thing that I would say is, with this being primarily focused on international companies for like English language, if you're going that route, probably just end up going directly to the websites of companies that you're interested in working for, because their job listings page ends up being, a lot of the times I find, more up to date than what these like aggregator websites like LinkedIn and Indeed can have. It falls out of relevance very quickly, I think, on those websites.
Thank you, John. I appreciate that. We still have a few other questions to get through, but one of the themes that's coming through has to do with visas. Mel, I'm going to give it to you because there's a question that says, I would really love to live in London, but I don't know how to get a work visa abroad. Do they look to hire local? Do you need a candidate to sponsor? And then a couple other questions also about visa situations, student visas versus work visa. I know that you're there as a student, but I'm wondering if you could speak a little bit to how to get work authorization in Europe or another country.
Yeah. So obviously, I cannot give any legal advice regarding visa stuff. But personally, a student visa was not hard to get. And honestly, in terms of work visas, the UK is a lot more flexible compared to the US. I've been on student visas in Kenya and the US and Eastern Europe, South America, as well as the UK now. And I feel like out of all of the people that I've met just here, there are so many work opportunities that give sponsorship and work visas. And so depending on the company, if the company is big and can provide that sort of sponsorship, then I think it's worth checking out. And then, like I said, it is a little bit less strict than the US. So that's a positive.
That's a positive. Thank you. John, what was your experience?
Yeah. So as Melanie shared, a lot of companies, particularly larger international companies, if they're really committed to a candidate or interested in working with them, they can assist with the relocation process. If you're going through the process yourself, I think the largest difference that I've encountered to what people may be used to in the United States, as Melanie said, is the openness and the ease of, or the relative ease of getting a visa. I'm also not a lawyer, so please research for your own markets. But something that I encounter regularly, whether it's in the Netherlands or in Germany or things like that, we're looking at potentially my partner joining me in Germany and what that would take. There's even job seeking visas where if you're a highly educated person and you meet the requirements of having, a university or a college degree and it meets the list of categories that they're interested in, you can actually temporarily get a residency permit in a country for a period of time if you can prove that you have the finances to sustain yourself in that country for that period of time and spend it looking for employment. Quite frequently, employment visas in other countries have a lot of requirements to the industry that you're working in and the level of career that you're joining at. For entry-level jobs, it's a bit rarer because typically the level of requirement for visas is defined by the salary that comes with the position. I think in Europe, an EU blue card is somewhere around like the high 40s or low 50,000 euros per year to receive, and it has to be on a specific list of industries that they're interested in hiring for. But there are still outliers. Something that I will quickly shout out is like Berlin, the state, because the city is also a state within Germany, has a visa type that's like a freelance writer visa specifically to Berlin, or like artist visas that are specific to Berlin for freelance work and individual work. So those are also potential things to consider if you're interested in freelancing or you're an artist, to find countries or locations that will allow you to freelance for a temporary period of time and eventually look to maybe to either build out your work as a freelancer or use that experience to then qualify for a later work visa at a company where they're willing to hire you for a higher salaried position. Those are all potential ins to consider. It takes a lot of Googling and a lot of research, but there are a lot of resources out there. So that's kind of my spiel on work visas.
We have two more themes that are coming up in question. One is the personal aspect. What was moving abroad like for you personally? Do you feel lonely? Was it difficult? If you have a big family, big network here at home, what are some of the things that you might suggest with regard to social and personal replanting yourself in a new context?
Yeah, so I can pick up that question. So obviously my first 6 months spent in Barcelona were with exchange students, and I was with my best friend in the whole world from Emerson. So we were there for 6 months. We had a great apartment. We were living the dream. And then everyone left and I stayed. And I had no friends except for the ones that I made who were from Barcelona. But in Spain, everybody goes on vacation for literally the whole summer and they're not there. So I had to find a way to make new friends and meet new people. So when I moved to another apartment, I moved to an apartment for international students or like young professionals. So I ended up living in an apartment with like 10 other international students, and I was meeting people from the Netherlands, India, Greece, Peru, Ireland, France. So that was a really good way of seeing other people and making new friends. But yeah, not gonna lie, that the summer was a little lonely because all of my friends that I had known for the first 6 months of my experience in a new country, they all left, they all went back home. So it was really hard, lonely a lot sometimes, but I recommend looking into a living situation like that. And also, if I had more time, definitely could join more clubs, language classes, stuff, something like that. So yeah, that's kind of my experience.
Thank you. Anyone else have something quick? And then I have one last question. But
Yeah, moving can definitely be isolating, and especially as someone who has had to move quite often, kind of starting over in a new country, new city, can be hard. But I feel like something I've been doing is kind of putting myself out there and using apps like Meetup in order to search out different groups and communities that have similar interests as I do, and kind of meeting people that way. And yeah, I think it's been a good way to kind of get myself out of the house and kind of plug myself into the local community.
so I think the last question that's coming through, I'm going to kind of reframe the question that Andres sent about specific pointers for somebody that might want to work abroad in the future. I'm wondering if you can give me the 3-word version or something like that. Maybe just point to a specific resource that was useful to you. If you have 1 or 2 things, was it LinkedIn? Was it personal? Was it networking? Like, what are the things that made the most difference if you were going to, package it up small?
For me, it was LinkedIn
Mhm.
and in-person networking.
Okay.
So networking in total.
Visit before you work if you can.
That sounds like a hashtag.
I just point back to what I was saying earlier about the experience of working in different contexts. If you get a feel for what you're getting yourself into, you know if it's right for you.
And I think I'd just say kind of spread your net far and wide.
Yeah, okay. Those are great tips. Yeah. So it looks like I have one more question that's coming through. This one is specific to cinematography, film production. Anybody able to
Hi.
discuss this? John, how about you?
Local broadcast producer here. Hi, Chris. If you're interested in cinematography and film, 2 methodologies. One is more indirect, one is more direct. I think if you are looking at staying based in the United States and you end up building a career or a profile where people want to bring you abroad, that's obviously one way, but that takes time. To immediately make the jump, the freelance visas, I think, are the big thing. Finding what cities where you can be creative, where you can freelance, where you can do individual work. The freelance cinematography, film production, studio model exists globally. Here in Berlin, for example, we heavily leverage in my studio freelancers that come from a variety of countries that are based here in Berlin on freelance visas, and they go through crewing websites like Workers United, I think, is a big crewing source here, and there's a lot of kind of networking and groups there. So freelance visas for the cities that you're interested are going to be big, and then hopping into, it's going to sound really boomer, I'm sorry, Facebook production groups to really get the lay of the land for what websites are actually used is a big one. That's like the quick life hack. It's always easy to find like Berlin film production on Facebook, and then you can see what websites they're actually using there. Those are my big hacks and big tips for cracking into kind of freelance creative work in the production space out here.
Super, thank you. That was very helpful. I'm so appreciative of your time and your expertise and your energy and you giving back to Emerson after coming back to sort of give us your wisdom and share us your stories, which is what Emersonians do best. So thank you to all 3 of you. Thank you to Emmy and Jenny for putting this together. I hope that the rest of you, I just want to give a shout out to 4 more events that we have happening for Emerson International Week. At 2:00 today, we have our language tables. I believe we have 8 different languages that are represented. So come chat in Farsi or, I don't know, Swedish or Portuguese. Meet us in the private dining hall in a few minutes. Industry talks tomorrow. There's a webinar that's going to be happening with Taikisha Morgan, as well as our colleagues at Paris College of Art, looking at women producers in the art house industry. Would love to have you join us for that at 12:00 tomorrow. It's on Zoom. LA, we see you. We know that there's a Global Food Festival at Emerson LA this evening. And then our final event of the weekend is going to be our first ever Athletics Department World Cup. We have 12 teams participating. It's a full house. So they just need people to come cheer them on. So be there Sunday, 5 p.m. in the Piano Road Gym to round out the last of our IEW events for this week. And if you want all the details, you can find them at emerson.edu /IEW for the win. So thank you again, everyone, and we hope to see you at a few more events coming up.
Thank you,
care.
everybody.